In this video I'm going to demonstrate how to use the polyex Photoshop action. So I'll work through two examples in this video tutorial just so that you get a good understanding of how the action works and some good customization techniques. So firstly, this is the first example that I'll use. Just got a stock photo here. So the action creates this type of effect here. It creates like a triangular pattern throughout the area that you define, and it also gives you the opportunity to import textures which sit behind your subject and also in the middle of your subject there. So I'll demonstrate how to do all that. This is just an example of the textures turned off, so you don't have to use the textures if you don't want to. You can just use this effect on its own. So this is a second example I'll work through. So this is a stock photo, and we'll work to recreate this. Okay, so I'll just click through some more examples that I've got of the effect. And that one's with the textures turned off. Create a bit of room here. Where was I? Here. So that. Textures off. And lastly, that one. To that. Alright, let's get into it. I'll close these all down. And we'll start from the beginning. Alright, so firstly, we'll go through all the things you need to check off just before we run the action, just so that you get no errors and everything runs smoothly. So firstly, when you've opened up your photo, just look into the layer panel. Your photo layer should look identical to this. It should say background and have that lock symbol. Okay, so if your photo doesn't, so for example, I'll just set this up so that it doesn't. So say I just open up my photo and it's called layer 1 or anything else. What you need to do is go to layer, new, background from layer, and that will just set it as the background. Okay, so still in the layer panel, go to this top right hand corner icon, click that, go to panel options, right down the bottom here, make sure add copy to copy layers and groups is ticked. Click OK. Next, go to image mode, just ensure you're in RGB color mode and 8 bits a channel is ticked. Next, go to image size. Try to use a high resolution photo for this action. You can see mine's 1600 by 2500 pixels. That's a really good range to use for this effect, but anywhere between say 1500 pixels up to 4000 pixels should work really well with this effect. And make sure the resolution of your photo is anywhere between 72 to 300. Alright, so I cancel that. So next I need to load up the actions panel. So you go to window, actions, and just go up to this icon here and go to load actions. Just select the polyex.atn file. It'll pop up there. Now what I need to do is create a new layer. So you can go to layer, new layer, and just call this brush. It must be all lowercase. Okay, otherwise the action won't work. So let's click OK on that. So with the brush layer selected, what you need to do now is just highlight your subject. You can either brush over the top of your photo with this layer selected, or use the magic wand tool or the magnetic lasso tool to select your subject. But to save a bit of time, I'm just going to open up one that I've already brushed around. It's this one here. Okay. So you can see I've got my brush layer and I just traced around my subject. Okay. Now, excuse me, what I need to do now is load up the brushes that came with the download. So just hit B on the keyboard and right click anywhere over the canvas, and you can see that there's just the basic brushes. But what I want to do is that I want to replace all these with the brushes that came with the download. So you go to this icon, go to load brushes, select polyex brushes.abr, and they appear down the bottom. Actually, what I might do, I'll just replace all these. Okay, so they're the brushes that came with the download. Okay, I'll just close that. Almost there. What we need to do now is just hit B on the keyboard again, and just make sure the opacity of your brush is at 100%. You'll run into errors if the opacity of the brush is, somewhere down in this range. Make sure it's just at 100% all the time. Okay, we are ready to go now. So what you need to do is just select the polyex action, and if you twirl open the action here, you'll get a little scroller bar here, and then I'll just give you an indication of, as the action's playing, how much time's got to go left. But I'm just going to click play now, because in a few seconds there's going to be a pop-up, and that pop-up is going to ask us to choose a texture to import into the design. Okay, so I've included some links to some really good sites below in the description. Check them out, because they offer some nice high resolution photos which are like perfect for this action, so check them out. Okay, so the actions are stopped with this window here, and I'll just read it out. It just says, now select a photo to overlay on top of the design. I have included a list of great places to download free high resolution photos in the readme file. Yeah, you can also check the description below. Once you have selected your photo, move or scale it over the lower half of your subject. After you have moved the photo into position, hit enter on the keyboard to continue the action playback. If you need help with this step, just come back to this tutorial. Hit continue below to proceed. So I'll show what all this means. So all you need to do is click continue, and I've just got two textures here. So this one here I'm just going to select, just a city image, and basically what you need to do from here is, you notice that the action stopped and you've got these handles around your photo. So it's just asking you to move or scale your texture into place before the action will continue. So the way, what you want to do with this is just move the texture over the lower half of the area that you cut out of your subject. Doesn't matter if it's, it doesn't matter if you accidentally put it up here and then you continue the action. You can still move the textures around after the action's finished, but it's just best to get in the habit with this action just to move it to the lower half of your subject. Okay, and you want to scale it over so it fills your subject there. Now to continue the action, all you need to do is hit enter on the keyboard, and now it'll continue playing back. So you can see the scroll bar there, it's going down. So it's going to take about a minute and a half to finish this action off. So I'm just going to fast forward this video and get to the result, and yeah, we'll go from there. Alright, the action's finished, and this is the result that I got. So I'm just going to minimize the action here, collapse the actions panel, and looking into the layer panel now. As with all my other actions, the first thing you always want to do is collapse all the folders, just so that everything's much neater. So to do that, hold down Control Alt or Command Option on a Mac and click on that arrow next to the folder icon. Click on that, everything collapses. There you go. Okay, so the top layer here, the brush layer, I've left on. So if you wanted to run the action again, shift select these two folders, delete them, and then you can just play the action again. Undo that. So every time you run the action, even if I run it with this same selected area, the pattern inside of your subject will be randomized every time, and also all these triangles that are scattered here, they'll be in a different position, and also that subtle texture you see in the background, that'll be randomized. So it's worth running the action 3 to 5 times and saving each result out as a separate Photoshop file, then just open them all up and just take a look and see which one you like the best and just work from that one. But we'll go ahead now and talk about all these layers and how to customize the look. So we'll come back to the adjustments folder. That's just got some color options and also some adjustment layers. So we'll leave that. So we'll go inside the polyex folder. Now the top layer here, reveal normal photo, and I've got in brackets brush mask. This one is a good layer if you want to clear up any features in your design. So for example, say his face is too distorted by all the patterns. What you can do is, if I just select the mask here, that black box, and if I hit B on the keyboard, get my brush out, I'll right click. I'm just going to select this soft brush that I included in the brushes. Select that. Now if I grab a white brush, I'll just flip this over, so I'm going to white brush. If I start brushing into that mask there, all that's doing is just revealing the base photo. So what you can do here is I can just brush a big patch over his face there, just like that. And if I just lower the opacity down on this layer, it's going to slowly blend back towards, if I bring it to 0, it's like we did nothing, 100%. So what I like to do is brush a big patch over the subject's face if it's too distorted, and then I'll just lower the opacity so that you bring back some of those lines, but at least the face is at about 46% there. There's 0. I mean, it looks pretty cool at 0, but just for the sake of showing you how this layer works, we'll turn it up to about 30%, because I just want to keep some of those lines there. So that's a really important layer. So when the action's finished, just take a look at your design, just think of any areas that you want to clear up a bit and use that layer there. Okay, this layer, original photo color, all this does, it overlays the original colors of your photo over our brushed area. So I'll turn it on and off, you can see that there. So you probably want to keep that on most of the time. This layer here, photo detail, and I've got in brackets opacity. So if I just bring this opacity to 0, so if I move my mouse and click on the word opacity, drag to the left, bring that to 0, 100, 0. So when at 100%, it basically brings in more detail from the original photo. And 0, it takes out a lot of detail. So, bring it to 0 and take a look around. You might think that, okay, the top of his head here looks much better than what it was at 100%. So what you could do is again use the mask. So if I click on that mask there, and if I hold down Alt or Option on the Mac and click on that mask and go inside, so anywhere in white is where that layer is going to appear. Anywhere in black, it's going to be hidden. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to brush black, hit B on the keyboard again. I'm going to switch this over to black. Brush on his head there. Okay, so that is like, so if I turn that on and off now, I can take a look around the design and think of any other areas that look better with the layer brushed away. Maybe his beard. Watch that bit. So you can really fine tune it, the design that way as well. So flick the layer on and off, take a look around the design, and then ask yourself, do certain areas look better, and then brush into that mask, sort of to control, where that layer appears. Okay, moving down here, we have this folder called floating polygons. If you turn this one on and off, that's all those triangles that are shooting out everywhere. Okay, so we'll go inside here and take a look how this is set up. So there's 3 main layers, and I've highlighted them in red. Small polygons, large polygons, blurred polygons. So if you turn them on and off, you can see which ones they are. And the layers above, you'll see these 3 here. I've got use original photo color. So if I turn it on and off, you can see how it just goes to black. So what this is doing, this layer here, it's spreading out the original colors of your photo, and it's using that to fill in the triangles. So it's actually the original colors of your photo, spread out through. So if I grab the large polygons and I start moving that around, you'll see, look at this one here, as I drag it down, see how it changes color? It's going to go with, the original colors of your photo. So that's pretty cool. You can use a solid color, turn these ones on, just like that. So if you want to fill them in a solid color, you can just double click on this box here to change that color. Pretty simple. If you want to create more copies of all these triangles, what's best to do is shift select that group of layers, and hold down Alt or Option on the Mac and drag up. That's just made a copy of them all. So now I can move these around. You probably want to, hit Control T or Command T and rotate them so they don't look like a complete duplicate, and move them around just like that. Okay, or you can duplicate the entire folder, hit Control J or Command J, and now I've just made a whole heap more. So, and what you could do from there is I could probably just go Control E or Command E, so let's put them all on one layer now. See that there? Flatten it all. So now I can do something like I go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. You can blur those ones out so makes it look like it's got a bit of depth, which is pretty cool. So I'll just click OK on that. Alright, so these two folders here are the textures. Now if you don't want the textures, you just want that sort of abstract pattern, turn these two folders off. That's all you need to do. So even if before you run the action, you only want to use it without the textures, still go through the motions of importing a texture, but just quickly, as soon as it's finished, hide these two folders, and then you're left with that pattern. Okay, but we'll talk about these two folders here. So we've got this one here called Inside Texture, and this one called Outside Texture. So this folder here is the texture that resides inside of the area that you brushed. Okay, you can see that there. So we'll go inside and we'll go from the top. So this layer here, Show Photo Detail, this works with the opacity. So if I drag this opacity to 0, you'll see, and then I'll bring it to 100. See, at 100% it brings in some of the detail from a photo, so you can still make it out. But if you just want purely the silhouette, you bring this opacity to 0, and you can see that creates a cool effect as well. So you can use that either way. You can play around with the opacity of that layer. Okay, so here's the texture, Inside Texture. If I move that around, you can see that moving inside our subject there. Okay, and if you want to change the texture, it's really simple. All you need to do is right click on this layer and go to Replace Contents. Okay, and I'll just grab this other city texture, double click on it, and it's completely replaced it, and it's replaced that copy in the background as well. So that's really quick and easy to do. And if, say, the texture that you import is too small, you see it's a bit small there, it hasn't hit the bottom, you can just hit Control T, grab those handles and scale it up, move it around, get something that looks really abstract. So I'm just going to undo that and get back to this. Okay, and actually one thing I'll show you how to do is, you'll notice that when I replaced this texture, it also replaced the one in the background there. If you want to have two separate textures, follow these steps. So what you want to do is right click on the inside texture, go to New Smart Object via Copy, just like that. Delete this one here, Inside Texture. Now select the Inside Texture copy, hold down Alt or Option on the Mac and move your mouse between these two layers here. Okay, Alt, you see that white box with the arrow pop up, click on that, and so it's now clipped it to only appear within our brushed area. You can see it there. But what we can do now with this copy is that we can replace it, just like we did before, right click, Replace Contents, and I can select a different texture. So I'll grab that one, and now you can see that it hasn't replaced the background texture with the one within our subject. Okay, so just follow those steps if you want to use two different textures. So I'm just going to undo that. Okay, now what's another important thing to note here is that if I move this texture up and down, you can see how it doesn't really go any further than, say, halfway up our subject. And that's why at the when we started playing the action and we got to that step where I told you to move the texture over the lower half of the subject, it's because that inside texture is restricted to appear only in the lower half of of the area that you define. So you can see that happening there. And what's restricting it is that mask, this black and white mask here. So if I go inside, so the white area is where it'll appear, the black is where it won't appear. So if I just hold down shift and click on that mask just to disable it temporarily, you can see that now that texture overlaps throughout our entire subject, but it's overridden our triangular pattern over our subject. So that might be a look that you prefer, but if I now click on that mask again, you can see it's now restricted it to that. It's now restricted to that area again. And one thing I like to play around with is if you just select that mask, click on it, hit Control T, you can scale it up and down. So you can have it appear higher, or you can bring it down here so it's only in this lower section there. So that's a good thing to play around with. Or you can again just grab a brush tool, hit B, grab that soft brush, grab a black brush, and you can sort of just brush on where you want that texture to not appear. Alright, moving on down, outside texture, that's the texture that appears in the background there. So if you don't want it, turn it off. Similar setup, a few different things here. So if I just double click on this outside texture brightness, play around, click in the middle of this this line here, and you can play around with the brightness that way of the texture. It's pretty simple. Here's the outside texture, you can move that around. Again, if you replace the texture and it's too small, so say I replace the texture and it's only that big, okay, don't worry, just hit Control T and scale that bigger than your entire canvas, and that'll fill in all that black cloudy texture with your photo, just like that. Okay, outside texture area, so this is just the area that the texture appears. You can see that I've got a mask on this layer again, so I'm restricting it to only appear in the white area. This layer here, increased texture density. If I turn that on, it basically just doubles up on that background texture, so the texture just looks a lot more prominent. So you can turn that one on and off to see if it looks better with your design. Paint texture, this one's very subtle, but it'll be more prominent on every time you run the action. You get different results. So it's just a subtle paint texture that sits in the background there. I'll just move that around so you can see it. You can see that there. So that'll appear in random spots around your photo each time you run the action. I'll zoom back in a bit here. Polygon edge lines, if I turn this folder on and off, you can see that there how it, I might just turn off the inside texture for a moment. You can see how that sort of traces around the edges of all those triangles with a thin line. But what I like to do with this folder is I'll turn it on and off, and I'll take a look around the design and think, is there any particular area where it looks better with the lines on? So, so we can get a bit creative. So what I might do is use this folder mask. I'll click on it and I'll invert the mask, Control I or Command I. So it's basically just hidden it all, it's flipped it to black. So I'll grab my white brush, hit B, to flip these two over. You can see how black is my active brush, white is my background brush. If I hit X on the keyboard, it'll flip those two over. Now, what I like to do is just flip that folder, so I'll just hold down Shift to hide that mask, and I'll click it on and off. And I'll just take a look around and think what areas look cool with a few lines visible. So I might just brush, a little bit of detail here, a little bit here on his chest. Just really subtle areas. Here. His arm. Okay, so that's that folder there. Polygon texture. This does most of the work, this folder. So if you go inside here, you can play around with the brightness. So if you double click on this adjustment layer here and play around with this handle here, one you want to experiment with, you can make them lighter and darker. that. Bring that down a bit. Color saturation, you probably don't need to play around with this one too much. You can see what that does there. That has more an effect if you turn off the original photo color. I think that will, yeah, so you can play around with the saturation there. Crazy things with the color. But with that layer on, you don't really need to play around with that one too much. And these are the two layers where the texture appears. So what I like to do is, every time I run the action, I'll quickly jump into this folder and I'll flip these two layers on and off. And I'll take a look around and I'll ask myself again, do any areas look better with the layer turned off? Now that one is doing most of the work with this photo, so that one's fine. I'm just going to leave it how it is. But when I turn this one on and off, I actually prefer his face with it off, but not so much his stomach here. So when I turn it off, you'll see that it's removed some of the triangles, but his face, I think I prefer with it off. So I'm just going to use the mask, and I'm just going to grab a black brush to remove. Hit X on the keyboard, flip those two over, and I'll just brush over his face now, just like that. I'm just going to hide this layer again. So now that layer is only affecting his stomach, but I've removed it around his head because it looked better with it off. So you're not restricted to the default look of the result of the action. Jump into this folder, flip those two on and off, and then just control the areas where you think certain things look better through the masks. Okay, so these two layers here, what I might do is just turn off the textures. I'll just turn off that. So the black backing mask, black backing plate, we'll just put a black fill behind everything, and this one is a white fill. And the same as before, what I like to do is firstly, flip these on and off, just like that, and ask yourself, do areas look better with it on or off? So as I turn that on and off, I'm looking around, and I actually like the top of his head, the way that's making it a bit brighter, like that. So I'm just going to control where this layer appears. So I'm just going to select the mask, and I'm going to hit Control I again, or Command I. I'm going to invert that mask. Now I can control with a white brush, hit B, X, I'll flip those two over. Now I can just brush on the top of his head, because it looks better, well in my opinion, with that layer only appearing up the top there. So I'll hold down Shift to temporarily hide it. So all I'm doing here is previewing. Okay, so same deal with the black one. I'll turn it on and off. Looking around, I don't mind his jacket being darker, so what I might do again is Control I, I'll invert that mask, hit B, going to grab a white brush, I'm just going to brush over his jacket. Just like that. Hold down Shift. Alrighty. So those are two very important layers, and they can affect your design quite a lot. So, yep, when the action's finished, go down to them, jump inside this folder at first, flick these two on and off, and see if they look better. Control the appearance of those layers with the masks, and the same with these two here. Now, this layer here, vignette, if you turn that on and off, all that's doing is adding a soft edge, black edge, around your canvas, so you can turn that one on and off. I think this looks good with it on. Background color, you can just double click on this box and play around with the background color that way. Okay, I'll cancel that. Now if you want to export this design with a transparent background, follow these steps here. So just turn off the background layer, like that, and then click on, see how this mask has got a big red X to it, just click on that mask, and now the background is gone. and you can just save that out as a PNG, a transparent image, and drop that onto another design or whatever you're working on. Okay, so I'll turn it on. I'll hold down Shift and hide that background again. So if you just click on that mask with the background visible, it's going to fall onto the design is going to fall onto your original background. With this, it looks pretty cool because you can see the shadow. It makes it look like he's popping out from the design. So that's actually pretty cool. But what I could do is I could double click on this mask and lower the density. So that's like a blend between that mask being off. Sorry, that mask being on and that mask being off. So I can just play around with that. Okay, so that's all looking pretty cool. So I'm just going to jump back into the adjustments folder now, talk about these layers. So this one here, overall contrast 1, in brackets opacity. Whenever I've got a layer in brackets opacity, I'm just telling you I'm telling you that this layer affects the design through the opacity. So you can see at the moment it's 0. I'll drag this to 100%. Click on that word opacity, drag to 100, 0, 100. So I'll start off at 0, click and drag slowly to the right, and that's just increasing the contrast. I prefer this design with no contrast, so I'm just going to leave that off. Overall color saturation. If I double click on this layer, you can grab this saturation handle here and increase that. If you want black and white, just do that. But I might just increase the colors a bit, just like that. Overall contrast 2. Just double click on this one. You probably don't need to play around with this too much. This is just the default result of the action. I've added a bit of contrast to the design. So this handle here is the shadows. So if you want to crank up the brightness of the shadows, you can grab this handle here. Okay, I might just turn it up a little bit. This is your mid-tones, this middle one. And this top one is your highlights. Play around with that layer if you want to. Now these 10 folders here are color options. Now the way these work is if you just turn the eye on for the folder, it will apply a different color grade, which is pretty cool. So that looks really cool, I like that. And you can combine multiple ones, so I can turn on this one and turn on, what's a different color? That one there. So 5 and 7, so you can combine them, and you can also adjust the opacity of the folder. So say for example, color option 5 is a bit too strong. I'll just click on that word opacity, drag to the left, 0, 100. So I'm going to just use 40% of that one. Turn this one on. 38% of that one, and I've quickly created a cool color grade for this design. But I actually really liked, where was it? I think that looks pretty cool. Might just lower the opacity of the vignette down. Alright, so that's essentially how to use the layers. Really simple, but just get in the habit of doing some of those more important things that I spoke about, like inside the polygon texture folder, turning these, flipping those layers on and off. These two here, okay, they will heavily affect the appearance of all of the triangles inside your subject. And also, with the links I provide to these stock photo websites, download a big folder of a whole heap of different textures and backgrounds. And because what I like to do is, I will run the action, I'll choose a texture, but that texture might not look that great. So what I'll do, I'll just sit here and I'll just go right click, replace contents, and I'll just keep selecting different textures and just get to make a decision on which one looks the best. Okay, and you can create these really detailed designs in no time at all. So there's our original, and that's what we created. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to open up that second example and we're going to customize that. Alright, so I've got open the second example now, and I just went through the steps of setting up my Photoshop file. I played the action, choose the texture, and this is the action. It's just stopped. So got a few changes to make looking at this. So what we're going to do now is firstly collapse all these folders again. So Control Alt or Command Option Mac, I'm going to click on that arrow. Everything is collapsed. So I'll just turn these two off. So you can see the before and after there. So that was the area that I brushed. Just traced around my subject there. And so looking at this design, the first thing I need to do is scale up that background texture because it hasn't quite filled in the entire canvas or the entire background area. So I'll go inside the outside texture folder. I'm going to select the outside texture, zoom out, I'm going to hit Control T, and I'm going to grab these handles and scale it out, fill the entire background up. So that is much better. Now with this design I might actually turn off the inside texture, just like that. And what I might do, I might hide the outside texture as well, and I'll just work on the look of this triangular pattern first. So I'll go inside the polygon texture folder and I'll flip these two on and off. So that one there is doing most of the work for this one, so I'm just going to leave that on. This one isn't affecting the design too much, so I don't actually need it on at all. So just looking at it, yeah, I'm just going to leave it off, okay, because this one's basically doing all the work. This one's just adding little patches of darkness, so you don't need that. But like I said, these two layers will affect photos completely differently each time. It really depends on, you know, the contrast in your photos, the color range. So it's worth checking both of them out. Very important. So leave that. I'll flip this one on. So all I'm doing is flipping these on and off, taking a look around, see if any areas look better with that layer turned on. Probably the only area I'll do is, so I'm going to flip this mask, Control I, so it's completely hidden. I'm going to grab a white brush, and I might just brush over her feet here. Hold down Shift, I'm going to temporarily hide that mask. Maybe jump it here and there, because it looked good, a bit brighter. Turn the black one on again. I'm losing a lot of detail there when I turn that black one on with this particular photo, so I'm just going to leave it off. I think that's looking pretty cool. Now I want to make her face a bit more prominent. You can see it's hidden away behind all the textures there, so I'm going to use that Reveal Normal Photo layer. I'm going to select the mask, grab a white brush and just brush right there. Now I'm going to lower the opacity of this layer. So all that's doing is bringing back some of those lines into her face. So her face is much more prominent now, and you can still see those subtle lines running through, which is exactly what I wanted. And I'm going to just turn this one on and off. See if that, hide this mask. Okay, so look at this design. When I'm hiding that mask, turn it on and off. I think I like the skateboard being a bit darker. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to select that mask again, grab a white brush, I'm just going to brush over that skateboard, just like that. It's pretty cool. I might change this background colour to a grey. Alright, that's looking cool. So I'm just going to turn on the outside texture now. Now what I might do with this outside texture is make it black and white. So to do that, I'll just go inside here. And if I just select the outside texture layer, and I'll go down the bottom here and select black and white. So all that's done now is it's converted that texture to black and white, that photo there. Now what I might do is also lower the opacity down of this entire folder. So I'll select the outside texture folder and drag the opacity down so it's much more subtle, like that. And what I might also do is, as I turn this one on and off, the background layer, I might actually blend up from the ground here, the original photo where she's standing, to the background that we just created. So what I'm going to do is if I just turn the polyex folder on and off, okay, so it's just basically like a before and after. What I'm going to do is select this mask, okay, and I'm going to hit G on the keyboard. I'm going to get my gradient tool out, and I'm just going to drag a line here from the bottom, and I'm just going to drag it up and release it. So what that's done is it's just created a mask, a gradient mask. I'll just go inside here. You can see from black to white. So all that's doing is blending, you know, it's going to hide the areas in black. So everything contained in this folder is going to be hidden in the areas that are black and visible where it's white. So you know, I can hit Control T now. That's not going to work. I'll just grab that gradient again, and I can drag it up way higher, just like that. So you can see that's created a blend between our original photo and everything inside the polyex folder. So that's a cool thing to play around with. But one thing I want to do here is see how the effects have sort of disappeared from her feet and the skateboard a bit. It's because we've essentially masked it out. What I'm going to do is grab, I'm just going to hold down Control or Command Option Mac and click on that brush layer. All that's going to highlight the area that we brushed. Now if I select that polyex folder mask, I'll flip this to black. I want to fill white. I need this to be white because we want to make it visible. I'm going to fill everything here white. So to do that, I've just made white my active color. Now if I hold down Alt or Option on a Mac and hit delete, what that's going to do is just going to fill that selection with the foreground color, which is white. So you can see now the effects have come back in. Okay, but we're still creating that background blend, which is cool. So if I go inside this mask, you can see what I've done there. So white is where everything inside this polyex folder is going to be visible. Black is where it's going to blend onto everything below it. So that's a cool technique there if you want to blend between everything in this folder to your background layer. Just follow those steps and you create something cool like this. So I'm going to now jump inside the adjustments folder and play around the contrast. Maybe I'll turn it up just a little bit. Color saturation, I'll turn that up a bit. Let's have a look at these color options. Color option 5 is pretty good. That one's pretty cool. 9 and 5, so I'm just going to drag this up and flick between 9 and 5. I think 5 is pretty cool. And I'm done, I'm happy with that. So let's compare that against the original. So you can see a huge difference with not much effort at all. Okay, so that's it. That's how you use this action. It's very simple, really fun to use. I've been, experimenting with a whole heap of different photos and getting some really cool results. But if you're having troubles with it, just make sure firstly that you check out this video, that your Photoshop file is set up correctly and you're doing everything right. And next, send me an email and I'll help you out. All right, have fun. Thanks.